Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
The State Department of Revenue has developed a unique program to aid struggling small businesses. I recently spoke with Dr. Linda Milsaps to learn more. Dr. Linda Milsaps, welcome to North Carolina Now.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Now, Dr. Millsaps, you are the Chief Operating Officer of the North Carolina Department of Revenue. Now, I hate to say this, but usually when people think of the Department of Revenue, they think of collecting taxes. But the department is working on a program to help small businesses that are sort of struggling after these economic challenges. Tell us a little bit about that program.
All right, I'll be happy to do so. Well, it's kind of an unusual project for a Department of Revenue to take upon itself. Back in the fall, Governor Perdue asked several of the cabinet agencies to really think about ways that we could be helpful to small businesses during the economic downturn. And as you can imagine, at the Department of Revenue, this required a certain amount of creativity. But we do have some really bright folks, and we got together and came up with something that we think will be very helpful to some of the state's small businesses across the board, whether they're in rural areas or urban areas. And so what we're going to do is try to focus on some of those taxpayers that have had a good history of compliance before the most recent economic downturn. And but there are a lot of those folks, however, unfortunately, as things got worse and the downturn continued far longer than anything we remember, some of those folks with a good history kind of fell off the bandwagon, if you will. We started noticing that people who used to be very compliant, very timely, suddenly were not filing and paying their taxes appropriately. And the ones that we grew most concerned about were what we term trust taxes. Now, what we mean by trust taxes are ones that essentially are collected in trust for the state. So that includes things like the sales tax. A merchant collects it from a customer, and they're supposed to remit that money to the department. Similarly, withholding tax. They collect that from their employees, which is then supposed to be remitted to the state. So we call those trust taxes. We generally feel pretty strongly about you have to remit all of the money you collect. But again, we started seeing more and more taxpayers that used to be very compliant who were not making those payments. And we began to believe that some of those taxes were being used to make one more payroll, make one more payment to a vendor, some of those kind of things. And obviously that's not what you're supposed to do, but we also recognize that the downturn has been so severe that otherwise, had it not been for the really bad economy, they wouldn't have been in that situation. So what we're trying to do is to give them an opportunity to come into the department and get a little bit better terms with us than they would have normally. What that means is we will, if they participate in this program, we will be willing to waive their penalty, and in some cases those penalties can be very sizable, up to as much as 35%. And we would also waive the 20% collection assistance fee that is charged on our most delinquent accounts. And also not pursue a lien against the taxpayer as long as they are making payments on the account for the period of time of the program. Now, there are some other things that they have to do, but that's pretty much the benefits to the taxpayers.
Now, when you're looking at some of the small businesses who have been affected by the economic downturn, what types of businesses are you looking for? Are they in a specific area? What type of percentages are we looking at?
Well, really who we're trying to focus on are what we have termed small businesses, those with 200 or fewer employees. And they can be anywhere in the state, but of course we all know our rural areas have a lot of businesses with 200 and fewer employees, but so do suburban areas and urban areas, and all of those taxpayers are welcome to participate in the program. In looking at who our delinquent taxpayers are, right now we have about 251,000 business taxpayers. that we believe are delinquent in some way. Now, they could have gone out of business. When they're in the delinquent status, it's very difficult for us to know more about them. And some of those could be counted twice. If you're delinquent on sales and withholding, you're counted twice. But the total numbers I have are about 251,000 taxpayers, and all of those folks would potentially be eligible, again, if they had had a previous good compliance history.
Now, with the North Carolina Department of Revenue getting involved in such a program, are there any other Department of Revenue, say, across the country doing anything like this?
Not to the best of my knowledge. There might be, but I am not aware of it. And one of the things that we think makes this really unique and something we wanted to try and pilot in North Carolina is the partnership that we are using with the state small business centers through the community college system and the SBTDCs through the university system. As your viewers likely know, both of those organizations offer no-cost financial counseling to businesses. And so part of the trade-off for these taxpayers is we are going to require these taxpayers to participate in some counseling from those organizations in order to get the special treatment from the Department of Revenue. Because ultimately what we're really trying to do, while we clearly want the tax monies due the state, all the money that's fairly due, what we're really trying to do is encourage those small businesses to do the things they need to shore up their own finances so they can keep their doors open, so they can keep people employed, and so ultimately those folks can pay taxes because they have a job. And so that's really where we're trying to go.
Now, there are some who would probably say, okay, the Department of Revenue stepping in, trying to assist these folks who are behind on their taxes. Maybe this is some type of handout. What would you say to those folks?
Well, I think I would say it is clearly not a handout in that these folks will still have to pay all of their tax liability that they accrued, and they will also have to pay all of the interest. So they will have to pay all of those things. What they wouldn't pay is the penalty and the collection assistance fee. But that only happens as long as they come into the program, they make regular payments. We'll ask them to do that electronically. But make regular payments and get some counseling from these small business centers. And that is free, but that's always been free. So it's trying to marshal all the best of the state's resources to really be helpful to small businesses and the state's general fund.
And once again, what is your overall goal for this program?
Well, our overall goal is somewhat unusual for a Department of Revenue program. Our goal really is to, first of all, help these businesses that we believe are in dire straits get to the counseling and assistance they need to be able to put their finances back together, to be on sure footing, so they can continue to be a going concern, a successful going concern, and continue to employ people. Secondarily, we recognize that some of these folks, when they go through counseling, the answer might become, you really need to shut down your business. And we certainly don't want the Department of Revenue to be shutting businesses down, but we also don't want folks losing their houses or those kind of things over their business losses if there's a way to help them avoid that. And then finally, the governor's budget did include some additional revenues from this initiative. So we do hope to get some of these taxpayer dollars in, but that's really kind of a secondary goal. Our primary goal is to really help shore up the economy.
Dr. Linda Milsaps, Chief Operating Officer of the North Carolina Department of Revenue, thank you for stopping by and sharing your information with us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And to learn more about the small business program, call the North Carolina Department of Revenue at 919-715-3304 or 919-715-9919.
Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.